Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us this afternoon. As we allow others to enter the room, we welcome you to our conversation on clean energy investments in Governor Newsom's proposed budget. My name is Andrea Ambrose. I'm our Deputy Secretary for External Affairs at the California Natural Resources Agency. Today, we'll be joined by different interagencies for this conversation. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A box, and we invite you to send any questions you have through that Q&A box, and we'll effort to address as many of them as possible during our conversation. We continue to see that participants are joining the room, and we'll give them a few more seconds to join into the conversation. Thank you again for joining us. I'd like to introduce the California Natural Resources Secretary, Wade Crowfoot, to begin our conversation, and also invite our colleague from the Governor's Office, Senior Advisor on Climate, Lauren Sanchez, as well.
Yeah, let me turn it over to our fearless leader on all things climate, Lauren.
Hardly the fearless leader. Thanks so much, Wade. And thank you all for joining this afternoon. You all heard way too much from me on yesterday's stakeholder calls, so I'm excited to just tee it up with some excitement and then hand it off to our fearless energy building and Lithium Valley principals. Just wanted to start by thanking all of you on the call for engaging with us in the Governor's Office and across the administration on the budget and on our leadership on clean energy and decarbonizing our buildings and the intersection with housing. We're really excited to do the deep dive with you all today. As I shared yesterday, the governor unveiled a $37 billion climate package, really building on last year's $15 billion climate package, proposing additional investments to do three key things: to protect Californians from extreme effects of climate change, wildfires, drought, heat, to lead the world in reducing carbon pollution, and to build more prosperous and sustainable communities. As you all know, the state has a proud history of leading on clean energy, innovation, deployment, and nation-leading goals and progress, decades of progress. The budget investments really continue that leadership, advancing our energy equity goals, progress towards our 100% clean grid, ensuring grid reliability and resilience, and really jumpstarting our efforts to decarbonize buildings across the state, specifically in low-income communities. The governor also articulated a vision to really catalyze a Lithium Valley revolution to make California the battery capital of our world. So there's a lot to be excited about in this package. It's very much a starting point. Looking forward to working with all of you in the months to come as we work to finalize towards May and June and save the planet. Back to you, Wade.
Well, thanks so much, Lauren. And this meeting, or this convening, is all about getting to your questions and going a little bit deeper on our clean energy budget. I'll just say that, I feel really gratified with the progress we've made over the last decade, cleaning our energy portfolio and moving toward a more clean energy portfolio, ultimately to 100% clean energy portfolio. But we recognize with the acceleration of climate, we have to move further, faster. And that's why we're really excited about the governor's proposal to invest $2 billion of new funding into clean energy. Our Natural Resources Agency is the umbrella agency for two really important entities within state government that are anchoring this transition: the California Energy Commission, that we'll hear from in just a second, and the California Geologic Energy Management Division, or CalGEM. CEC is obviously driving a lot of the energy innovation and energy planning with the other energy entities in the state, and CalGEM oversees fossil fuel development in the state. And as we phase down and out oil production in the state, CalGEM is leading the way, protecting communities. And so my colleague Uduak Untuk is going to provide a little bit of that later in the presentation. But let me introduce David Hochschild, our chair of the CEC. So proud of what the CEC has been able to do in the first 3 years of the Newsom administration, and then what you might be able to do if this funding proposal becomes a reality. So David, turning it over to you to break down this $2 billion of proposed spending.
Well, thank you, Mr. Secretary, and good afternoon and welcome, friends. I've been in the clean energy field for 20 years, and the last 3 years as chair of the Energy Commission have been the most rewarding and the most challenging in my career. And I'm just incredibly proud of the more than 700 staff of the Energy Commission who have been working incredibly hard to advance all these climate solutions in close cooperation with all of our sister agencies. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the $2 billion in the energy budget and almost $2 billion in the rest of the package. And just to say that together, that's $3.8 billion altogether. That is the single biggest infusion to the Energy Commission in our 47-year history, and it's emblematic of the governor's bold leadership and really meeting the moment as we face the challenges of climate change. As Secretary Crowfoot has reminded us many times, the stakes with climate change are very high. And with this budget, we're well positioned to make a significant and positive contribution to moving our state and our world beyond polluting fossil fuels and towards a cleaner and more equitable future, ensuring a safe, affordable, and resilient grid. As I mentioned, altogether, the CEC is going to receive $1.8 billion through the energy package. This includes one of the most significant investments for building decarbonization in the nation, a total of $922 million over 2 years for the Energy Commission to implement equitable building decarbonization grants and rebate programs, which will address emissions from the existing building stock, which accounts for a quarter of statewide emissions. I would add, this is not just a climate issue, it is a health issue. And we know that emissions are more significant in low-income households that have poor ventilation. And so this is something that we're going to see benefits for public health as well as for our climate efforts. We'll also be doing $622 million as part of that for a statewide low-income direct install building retrofit program to fund building insulation and replace the polluting fossil fuel appliances with electric appliances. This program will advance our decarbonization goals and support market adoption of new technology while also dealing with the impacts of extreme heat in disadvantaged communities and saving these households money. The remaining $300 million over 2 years for broader consumer rebates for building upgrades, it's going to be a great addition as well. The second largest component in the climate package centers on energy storage, and the Energy Commission is proposed to receive $380 million in the general fund to promote long-duration energy storage, which is an important new technology category that's on the verge of commercialization that can hold a charge for 8 hours. This is really going to help support grid reliability and the integration of renewables as we green our grid to 100% clean energy. Other investments include $210 million to accelerate the decarbonization of the industrial sector, which accounts for more than 20% of the state's greenhouse gas emissions and employs over 1 million Californians. $85 million to continue to provide grants to help food producers save energy and reduce emissions through efficiency and renewable energy projects. This is a terrific program that's already funded projects on 66 sites with 85% in and benefiting disadvantaged and low-income communities. And I would just say, as Lauren has mentioned a number of times, we are addressing income inequality as we're addressing climate. That really is a theme that runs throughout this whole budget. We're also going to be doing $100 million to bring down the cost of hydrogen electrolyzers, which use renewable energy to create green hydrogen, a promising technology for the industrial sector, and $45 million to create the offshore wind energy deployment facility improvement program to support our agreement with the Biden-Harris administration advancing offshore wind energy in federal waters off of California's coast. The effort will specifically focus on activities that target different phases of preparing waterfront facilities to support offshore wind energy development, including developing individual or regional facility retrofit concepts and investment plans, supporting final design, engineering, environmental studies and review, as well as the construction of retrofits, providing cost share funding to applicants that apply for and receive a federal award that includes activities consistent with those identified above. The Energy Commission's budget will also include $1.5 million to support the development of a strategic plan for offshore wind energy as required by AB 525. And finally, $7 million is proposed to improve energy modeling activities to better reflect climate change impacts and ensure we're on track with our policy and planning making to make all the best available tools and technology available. This is a budget that gives me hope. And I think we've all seen over the last few years how California's leadership changes the nation and the world. And this is a budget that is, without question, the boldest climate budget ever introduced by any state in our nation's history. And it is going to produce not just a lot of good for our state, but I believe set the template for the nation and the world. So with that, let me turn it over to my friend and colleague, the chair of the California Air Resources Board, Leanne Randolph.
Thank you, David. I'm just really honored to be here to talk about this absolutely transformative budget. And I'm just going to be really brief. First, I just want to reiterate what David spoke about in terms of the health benefits from building decarbonization. If all homes were fully electrified today, the reduction of NOx and PM2 would achieve $3.5 billion in monetized health benefits annually. And I think that's a reflection that this budget recognizes that the price of inaction is huge, and the benefits of action and the health opportunities that we can achieve and the climate change impacts we can stave off really support the incredible investments that are being made as part of this budget. And so just really excited to be a part of this work. I want to highlight what is a small but groundbreaking piece of the budget, and that relates to hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs. They are the fastest growing greenhouse gases in California and globally. And HFCs are projected to be among the largest remaining sources of GHGs in 2045. And one of the largest uses of HFCs is in refrigeration and air conditioning, keeping food cold at your local grocery store and keeping people cool in their homes and offices, particularly during high heat events and when windows need to be closed during wildfires. In the 2019-2020 budget, CARB received $1 million for incentives and awarded 15 grants to supermarkets to implement state-of-the-art climate-friendly refrigeration technologies and increase workforce development. And the program was wildly successful, was 22% oversubscribed. And each of the projects we awarded is undergoing comprehensive performance evaluation so that we can understand what the right technologies are and how they're performing. So this budget increases that effort dramatically. There's $40 million over 2 years, and it will provide a significant acceleration of the adoption of ultra-low global warming potential refrigerants and help the state achieve the climate goals. And this funding will allow us to expand the program in both refrigeration and air conditioning, and allow us to continue our focus on priority communities and try to push those incentives to smaller users as well as larger supermarkets. So we're really, really excited about this small but mighty and groundbreaking program. So just really appreciate Lauren's work and the work of everyone in putting together this amazing budget. And so now I will be turning it over to Director Dee Dee Myers at GoBiz.
Thank you very much, Chair Randolph. Great to be here and have an opportunity to discuss all the wonderful investments in this budget. As you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic triggered the worst recession since the Great Depression. And while the recovery has been impressive by historical standards and was certainly aided by federal and state emergency assistance programs, there's a lot more work to be done, particularly among the communities and economic sectors hardest hit. So that's another reason why I think ensuring that our recovery is equitable and broad-based, particularly when it comes to clean jobs, is such a priority. So with that in mind, I want to focus on two topics: zero emissions vehicles and new tax credit programs to incentivize green technology, and job creation. This year's budget adds an additional $6.1 billion for ZEV development through 2025-26 budget cycle, with a particular focus on the communities that most need that change. And that brings our total investment over 5 years to $10 billion as we work to decarbonize transportation, which, as you know, is California's most polluting sector, and improve public health. So the ZEV package itself comprises 4 main buckets. First, low-income, zero-emission vehicles and infrastructure. Building on the prior budget's $250 million to take clean cars for all statewide, this year's budget invests an additional $256 million in special and general funds into continuing support for low-income consumer purchases. And then there's another $900 million general fund to expand affordable and convenient ZEV infrastructure access, specifically in those low-income neighborhoods. The infrastructure investments will focus on planning and deployment of a range of charging options to support communities, including grid-friendly high-power fast chargers and at-home charging to meet the needs of ZEV drivers who live in apartments, condos, and other low-income single-family homes. Low-income neighborhoods will also benefit from hydrogen fueling station expansion, which is underway through past and existing funding sources. The second bucket is heavy-duty zero-emission vehicles and supporting infrastructure. This includes $935 million in general fund to add 1,000 zero-emission drayage trucks and 1,700 zero-emission transit buses. Another $1.5 billion in education funds will enable the deployment of approximately 3,300 zero-emission school buses in a coordinated effort between education and air pollution and energy agencies. So a groundbreaking effort there. An additional $1.1 billion in special and general funds is included for zero-emission trucks, buses, and off-road equipment and fueling infrastructure, as well as $400 million to enable port electrification, all leveraging both batteries and fuel cells. The third bucket is zero-emission mobility. That's $419 million in general funds to support sustainable community-based transportation equity projects that increase access to zero-emission mobility in low-income communities, reducing vehicle miles traveled, and air pollution. This includes supporting clean mobility options, sustainable transportation, and equity projects. These plans have already been developed by communities that address mobility and are aiding communities in identifying their needs. So these are locally driven projects that will continue to be a direct response to critical mobility needs that we've identified and have been identified by community-based organizations and residents working on the front lines, so we can lift up those priority populations and take an equity-informed systems approach as we deal with mobility. And finally, the fourth bucket is emerging opportunities, and that's $200 million general fund to invest in demonstration and pilot projects in high carbon emitting sectors, such as maritime, aviation, rail, and other off-road applications, as well as support for vehicle grid integration at scale. So these investments will help maintain California's role as the hub of ZEV market creation and innovation and provide economic development opportunities, while at the same time accelerating zero emission solutions in those hardest to reach segments of our transportation system. So through these successful and continuing investments into the development of our zero emission vehicle industry, we've produced additional tools, created additional tools to apply these lessons learned in ZEVs to the wider climate crisis. And in doing so, we are announcing a set of targeted tax credits to induce further development of life-changing technologies that will help us address catastrophic climate change. So the first is the budget proposal. This budget generally restores the temporary limitation on the use of net operating loss deductions and the research and development tax credit. That's a year earlier than previously planned. As everyone knows, all innovation-based industries and pre-commercial businesses leverage these kinds of tools to attract capital, deploy resources efficiently, and enable acceleration to future profitability. So we recognize the importance tax credits have when choosing the optimal location to perform extensive research and development, and we want to keep it here in California. We also recognize that in order to make game-changing technology real, it will require additional regulatory and incentive-based levers. So that's what we're looking for. And that leads to the next, a new tax credit, the Innovation Headquarters Credit. This program will provide California headquartered companies that invest in activities and technologies aimed at mitigating climate change with new incentives. So it comes on top of the existing and now reinstated R&D tax credit, and will be $250 million a year for 3 years, administered by the Franchise Tax Board. And we hope that these additional incentives will accelerate advances in climate mitigation strategies, technologies, and solutions as we look forward to the state continuing to address catastrophic climate change. The second new credit is called the Green Energy Technologies Credit. It's $100 million per year for 3 years. And while in some ways it's similar to the Innovation Headquarters Credit, it provides a specific set of funds to target green energy technologies and enable our shift to full green energy production by 2045. So the credit will fund pre-development costs for technologies like electric vehicle manufacturing and infrastructure, geothermal, lithium extraction and battery manufacturing, long duration storage, methane emissions, and hydrogen technologies to reduce the use of natural gas. The credit will be awarded by a newly created Clean Energy Board, which will sit at GOBIZ, the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. And in order to ensure that all Californians share more broadly in the gains from these innovations, these particular credits will be structured so that if businesses become profitable, a share of those profits will be repaid to the state, not in an onerous way, but in a way that will create an ongoing opportunity, again, to both support businesses and share the benefits. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about Lithium Valley development more broadly. Lithium is becoming an increasingly critical resource as the state and the world move toward a clean energy future in order to tackle the climate crisis. And so the metal, along with other rare earth elements, is a crucial component of the batteries we need to power electric vehicles, enable a 100% clean electric grid, and move our homes and our industries away from fossil fuels. So while California has abundant untapped lithium reserves, including geothermal brine, that's more than a mile underground near the Salton Sea, getting to these resources has to be done with respect for the natural environment, and less invasive kinds of practices that are currently employed and have historically been employed for obtaining these materials. As you know, most of the current supply of lithium comes from Australia, Chile, and China, using old methodologies like strip mining that have long-lasting negative impact on the overall environment. Lithium Valley has the added benefit of being strategically important to our national security as well. If we can have a closer to home source of this critical element, that is obviously a huge benefit. So the state is poised to become a global leader in the development of new environmentally sound technologies that can produce lithium at scale with renewable electricity from geothermal power plants in the Imperial Valley. So the goal is to build out a world-class battery manufacturing ecosystem in tandem with lithium production and processing, that will also provide new economic opportunities in the Salton Sea region, which has often been left behind, delivering quality jobs and community benefits to the region. So in so many ways, lithium is vital to our state and national interests. It aligns with our long-term economic outlook, and it will help us enable a clean energy future, as well as the kind of economic development incentives that will stand up for clean energy sector, and more broadly. So basically, the administration is proposing a robust infrastructure that will create incentives to advance clean energy market here in California, provide Californians to share the benefits from these projects, and develop new labor standards that will deliver both community benefits as well as economic development and labor opportunities. So if we do it right, we can create a model in the clean energy sector that will guide state engagement in other opportunity areas, such as offshore wind, with a focus on supporting California's clean energy goals, while producing, again, real and lasting benefits for the people of our state. So with that, I turn it over to Secretary Castro Ramirez.
Thank you so much, Director Myers. Just really incredibly excited about all of the information that you've provided. And of course, excited to be working with you and several of our colleagues who have joined us today as members of the administration's climate cabinet. As mentioned by Director Myers, I'm Lourdes Castro Ramirez, and I serve as the Secretary of the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency. And again, it's just great to be here with my colleagues across state government to discuss the many ways that we are minimizing the impacts of climate change and providing opportunity for all Californians. By coordinating our efforts in housing, energy, and climate, we can implement strategies that improve the health and well-being of Californians, creating healthy places to live, places near parks, near jobs, in places that are walkable, near transit, and in amenity-rich areas with healthcare services, banks, and schools. California is uniquely positioned to confront climate change while investing in expanding opportunity and strengthening California's future. Together, we can achieve greenhouse gas reduction targets while not losing sight of the equity implications of our work. The climate and affordability crises are two of the most daunting challenges currently facing our state. Buildings are responsible for about 25% of greenhouse gas emissions in California. So we must work together on building decarbonization that allows us to maintain housing affordability for Californians while also increasing the health of communities. The California Blueprint doubles down on our housing goals and targets efforts to reduce the impacts of climate change on some of our lowest income neighbors and communities. To solve the climate emergency, we must also solve the housing crisis. California's housing shortage continues to be one of the most daunting challenges facing the state, especially for our neighbors hardest hit by this pandemic and communities of color. In 2021, through the governor's comeback budget plan and of course support from the legislature, a total of $10 billion was allocated over 2 years to double down on our housing affordability goals. This includes, of course, focus on expanding quality and stable housing, housing that is also in healthy areas, housing that is healthy and affordable. And when I say affordable homes or affordable housing, what I mean here is that housing that allows for individuals to be able to address the housing cost, utilities, and also the transportation costs that are embedded in the overall cost of housing, utilities, and transportation. More than half of California renters are currently cost burdened. That means that they're paying more than 30% of their income towards rent and utilities. Additionally, transportation costs are significantly higher for low-income households, with many paying more than 20% of their incomes towards transportation alone. When an individual or a household is paying more for rent and transportation costs, there is no space to save for emergencies. This is why our agency is proud to work with state partners to establish creative, innovative solutions to address housing affordability and climate change through clean energy efforts. Our agency and the Department of Housing and Community Development has been working over a decade to ensure that the state's building code changes are cost-effective and benefit residents. Building equipment retrofit incentives like those that are proposed in the governor's California Blueprint budget will encourage the decarbonization of existing buildings. Transitioning from natural gas boilers, furnaces, water heaters, and cooking appliances to modern electric appliances will help improve air quality and reduce greenhouse gas emissions for some of our most vulnerable residents. We are excited about the investments in the California Blueprint to retrofit buildings and the rebates for building upgrades. Our team looks forward to working with our state partners on connecting these investments with our efforts to increase the production and preservation of affordable housing. The California Blueprint also proposes to invest in infill housing that reduces commute times, furthers access and fair housing, and improves the health and well-being of Californians, especially low-income households and communities of color, with the goal of reducing residential segregation. This builds upon the significant progress that we've already made in furthering fair housing through the funding of housing that is provided through the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program. In just 1 year, the number of projects funded in high-resource areas increased from 12% to 41%, and projects funded in the highest resource areas increased from 8% to 30%. This is an example of the impact that we can make together across state government to prioritize housing policy in strategic places, and to address climate change. Our agency, BCSH, and our various housing departments are proud to be part of the government-wide effort to address the health and well-being of individuals and families, and to build sustainable and equitable communities across our state. My team at agency and our Department of Housing and Community Development will continue working closely with all of you on building a brighter energy future that allows us to create, improve, and maintain housing for all Californians. And with that, I'd like to now introduce State Oil and Gas Supervisor Uduak Antuk.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. I'm Uduak Joe Antuk. I'm the State Oil and Gas Supervisor and the Division Chief of the California Geologic Energy Management Division, or CalGEM. And really want to applaud Governor Newsom's 2022-23 budget, which includes $200 million over the next 2 fiscal years to properly plug orphan and deserted wells and associated facilities across the state. We have a 150-year legacy infrastructure history here, and we're really focused on that infrastructure that has no responsible operator. Properly plugging and abandoning these wells and facilities will protect health and safety of everyday Californians, mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, and reduce environmental hazards. The funding will be spread out over 2 years, $100 million for fiscal year 22-23, and $100 million in 23-24. These are one-time funds that will be used to properly plug and abandon wells, orphan and deserted wells across the state that have no responsible operator. Decommissioning these facilities completely with environmental remediation and research to support the decommissioning efforts is critical. CalGEM has already spent all of its authorized funding for state abandonment since fiscal year 16-17. And this additional funding will enable CalGEM to expand and accelerate the state abandonment efforts. We already have an inventory of 5,300 orphan, deserted, and potentially deserted wells across the state. California's orphan well problem is significant and may grow as the state moves to phase out oil extraction. California's crude oil production has been declining since 1985. There will be an increasing number of non-productive wells throughout the state. As California moves to phase out extraction in the state, the number of non-productive wells will grow, requiring operators to plug and abandon those wells. We expect all viable and current active operators to take care of their current wells. Many of these orphan wells are legacy of historic oil extraction practices across California, both onshore and offshore. If these wells and facilities no longer have viable operators to appropriately plug and abandon the wells, then the financial liability falls to the state to permanently seal and decommission those wells. Properly plugging orphan wells will eliminate an environmental threat for all Californians. If these wells are left unremediated, they will need to be, they could have the potential to leak into waterways and soils. They can emit climate damaging super pollutants like methane. It can present a physical hazard to people and wildlife near them. It's important that we make sure that these wells don't leak, don't have any injected fluids or formation water, ways that can be impacted from underground drinking water. Addressing these legacy environmental challenges also creates good paying jobs in key parts of the state. In places such as Kern County, There are skilled workers with the experience to support safe and effective well operations, alternative opportunities for high wage employment, especially as this industry and region in Kern County has been hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic. Plugging these wells will be an important economic recovery and employment opportunity for displaced oil workers. In closing, these one-time funds will allow California to also maximize federal funds from the new infrastructure legislation that created a $4.7 billion federal orphan remediation program. We'll be able to address more wells, create good paying jobs, and protect the environment. I'll now pass the baton back to Amber for Q&A.
Thank you, Uduak. And thank you all again for joining us today and hearing our presentations. We're eager to answer any of your questions, and we invite you to enter in any questions into the chat box. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to submit. We have a couple already in queue, and I'll invite my colleagues and also our secretaries and directors to help us address some of these. The first I'll start with is regard to Salton Sea. There were a few mentions of both Salton Sea and also the investments in Lithium Valley and how they might potentially support ongoing efforts in that area. And perhaps I'll turn it over to Secretary Crowfoot to speak about some of the investments at Salton Sea, and also invite Director Myers to speak about some of the investments to Lithium Valley.
Well, I would just share that stabilizing the Salton Sea, which is in Imperial County, Imperial and Riverside County, is a priority of the governors and our agency. And we've got a lot of active investment to address both the public health impacts of the shrinking sea and exposed shoreline, as well as restoring habitat, which is really important for fish and wildlife. I think the community leaders and certainly our agencies see the potential for revenue generation from the production of lithium to potentially support our work improving communities in the Salton Sea in that area. And I think the governor has been clear that lithium production, in that region certainly needs to help benefit the communities in that region. So looking forward to working with Director Myers and David Hochschild at the CEC. Importantly, the Lithium Valley Blue Ribbon Commission that Assemblymember Garcia and others set up to really hash out this question of really how do local communities benefit from this activity. Over to you, Dee Dee.
Thank you, Wade. Yeah, we're very excited about the opportunity from a lot of perspectives, including, as Wade said, the protecting the Salton Sea. But one of the most exciting things is that we can do this we can use new technology to create a sustainable lithium extraction process that doesn't currently exist and is not replicating the really destructive processes that are ongoing in other parts of the world. The community has to be involved, and the benefits have to be more broadly shared. There will be a royalty on lithium. And in addition to that, the $100 million clean energy tax credit that I spoke about will be something that hasn't been done before. Tax credits will be awarded with a warrant so that if companies are profitable, they'll repay those credits with an upside, again, not meant to be onerous, but meant to be beneficial to both the industry and to the communities. And we'll be able to use those resources to make sure that we can invest in things like job training, to make sure that the people who've lived in Imperial Valley and in the Salton Sea area can be part of the green energy workforce that will be so important in the future. And so I think, again, one of the goals here with the whole Lithium Valley process is to create a model of how we can move forward some of these new kinds of technologies like offshore wind, so that they benefit, they not only get us closer to our decarbonize goals, but also benefit the community in lasting ways.
Thank you, Secretary and Director. We have another question regarding long duration storage, particularly which technologies will be included. Will that include large or small? Will that include a variety, perhaps chemical batteries, compressed air, gravity storage? Would welcome some feedback from Chair Hochschild and others who'd like to join in.
Yeah, so the Energy Commission has invested almost $100 million in various storage technologies to date. Long duration is going to be particularly important as we get to higher and higher concentrations of renewable energy on the grid. We're getting about 2/3 of our electricity in California today from carbon-free sources, and we're required to get to 100% by 2045. I do expect we're going to be able to beat that goal, and storage will be an important part of that. But we're looking at a bunch of different chemistries. Obviously, there's a number that are out there. There's flow batteries, vanadium, and iron chromium, and iron air now, and others. And we're seeing actually a lot of new investment in the state as a result of some of the technology progress that's happening. So it'll be a portfolio of technologies, and we're eager to get it ramped up as quickly as we can.
Thank you, Chair Hochschild. We have another question regarding the distribution of building decarbonization funds, and it was mentioned a bit earlier. I'd like to invite either Chair Hochschild and/or Secretary Castro Ramirez to share a little more on the process for distribution and perhaps the vision for that process.
Well, I can just speak briefly. I mean, the climate strategy in California really runs concurrently, holding hands with our effort to lift up the communities that have been hit hardest by pollution in our state. And that is something we're doing in the transportation space. Half of the EV charging infrastructure we're putting in is going to low-income communities and disadvantaged communities. And we will be pursuing the same approach with the building decarbonization efforts, really trying to prioritize low-income communities as we are installing electric heat pump technology. And I think that brings a lot of benefits, as I said, not just for climate, but also for health. One other point I would make as we roll this out is electric heat pump technology, for example, water heaters, that's also a technology that can help support the grid, because there's some flexibility about what hours of the day that can be operated, and we can align that in ways that will help support the grid. So this is really about making everything that connects to the grid a good citizen of the grid. And this effort, this $1 billion in building decarb, is also going to be something that is going to be very helpful for grid reliability going forward.
Yes, thank you, Andrea. And I would just say that we're very excited and looking forward to continuing to work together across departments. There is a working group that includes the housing state leadership, along with the energy group. And the focus, of course, is continuing to look at greater alignment and also ways to co-invest the resources that we're deploying. So we look forward to continuing to ensure that there is an equitable approach to how these resources are being deployed, particularly, as I mentioned, in terms of ensuring that those resources reach those populations that are often left behind, or those populations that we know have been most impacted or hardest hit by this pandemic and by the economic fallout of this pandemic.
Thank you, Secretary. We have a few other questions regarding Orphan Wells, particularly the impact that they have on various different communities, and also the current status of the number of Orphan Wells and how this new budget will continue to support addressing those. There was a mention of $200 million a bit earlier. I'd like to invite Director Untitled to provide some perspective on the Orphan Wells investments in the budget.
Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, there are, we've identified approximately 5,300 orphan, deserted, and potentially deserted wells across the state. Some of these wells are in parks, such as El Scorpio Park in Los Angeles. Some of these are in tideland beach areas like Summerlin Beach in Santa Barbara that have been there since the 1910s. And we need to go in and one, we can plug so they're not a flow channel of oil to the surface, but also that they're also not leaking methane or other hydrocarbons. And so it's they impact different communities in different ways. In some places, they impede development. You can't build affordable housing if the oil wells are in the way. And then many of these are also in very remote locations based on the history of where oil and gas was developed happened over the last 150 years. So, but we are looking forward to doing a statewide program at an order of magnitude that we've never done before. Then also being able to maximize potential federal money in the recent infrastructure bill. That's a really exciting opportunity to match that money to make it go further.
Thank you, Director. We have a few other questions as well around transmission lines. Are there investments in this budget related to upgrading transmission lines or preparing our grid and other distribution grid upgrades and expansions? Welcome, Secretary or Director Hochschild and or others to jump in and reply to the question.
Yeah, so we will be needing to make some transmission upgrades. The California Independent System Operator is going to be very closely involved with that, as will the Public Utilities Commission. Obviously, this is one of those areas where energy efficiency really helps us. The more we advance energy efficiency and can reduce consumption, that can reduce the need for capital expenditures on transmission. And the more we are supporting smart technology, for example, on charging of electric vehicles to align that with times that work best for the grid, that can also reduce transmission. But there will certainly need to be more transmission as we move to 100%, and that's going to be a priority for all of our agencies going forward.
Thank you, Chair. And while you're still answering the other question, we did receive another one that you had mentioned during your presentation, particularly around how this budget presented today will either intersect or complement the Infrastructure Jobs Act that was recently passed by Congress. Welcome your thoughts on how CEC and other colleagues are complementing funds.
Well, very, very complimentary. First of all, I would say, the Build Back Better Act, we hope will eventually move. But for now, while it's stuck, what we're doing in California is really picking up that slack and moving ambitiously forward. And we hope other states follow suit. Fortunately, in the infrastructure package, there are actually a number of opportunities for further funding for all the stuff we're talking about. And we're going to be moving very aggressively to get various of these hubs located in California. That includes a carbon capture hub, a hydrogen hub, battery hub, and others that the Department of Energy is going to be making decisions on. The infrastructure bill has given them something on the order of $66 billion, which is triple their normal budget. And they're looking to locate technology hubs. We believe we can make those federal dollars go the furthest here because we're leveraging it with state dollars. And that's something in the months ahead, we're going to be working with our sister agencies, the governor's office and others to secure those funds for California.
Thank you. Another question is around these investments and just the timing of delivery. Are these proposed investments intended for the 2022-23 fiscal year, or will this be rolled out as multi-year proposals in future budget cycles? I'll offer that depending on the fund and the program proposed, they may differ, but we welcome any direct inquiries to the agencies here on the line and or to any of the staff that you engage with. Happy to answer any particular questions about certain appropriations. Another question that we have is really a follow-up around lithium as well. And really, what is the kind of status update of our work around the commission, and how are we engaging the public in that process?
I speak to that. So the Energy Commission is responsible for the Lithium Valley Commission. So we have a 14-member commission, which includes a very diverse array of stakeholders, including 2 tribes, local government, and many other interests there. We've been meeting monthly. And the commission, the Lithium Valley Commission, will be producing a report in October with a set of recommendations. We have been hosting, these are meetings that are open to the public, and anyone who's interested, invite you to participate. I will say, one of the things we're very mindful of going into this process is that very often extractive industries do not work out well for the communities in which they're located. And we have an opportunity to, as we scale lithium recovery in California, to do it the right way. We're very fortunate. This resource that we have is significantly different than lithium resources around the world. So almost all the world's lithium comes from 4 countries: Chile, Argentina, Australia, and China. In China, Australia, it's hard rock mining. In Chile and Argentina, it's these large evaporation ponds. And there are significant environmental footprints for that. This lithium resource is in a superheated geothermal brine, and it is pumped to run these geothermal power plants. You take out 250 parts per million of the lithium, and then the brine goes back down underground. So it's very, very small footprint. And that's one of the things that we're, I would say, sort of geographically fortunate to have a resource like that. But as we go forward, we're going to be ensuring that it's done the right way with a lot of community input and with community benefits. And I will just share with you that all of the lithium developers understand and actually support some sort of mechanism to deliver benefits from lithium recovery in California to the local community. And that's one of the things we'll be hashing out over the course of the next year.
Thank you. There's another question here around pairing health and safety repairs and structural upgrades needed in certain housing alongside electrification upgrades that are eligible. I'm just wondering if there's an opening for CEC to support that. Again, the pairing of health and safety repairs alongside electrification upgrades. Again, perhaps back to you, Chair Hochschild.
I think you guys are probably getting a lot tired of hearing from me, but we'll certainly be looking at that. What we are requiring in our new energy code, which was adopted in August, is that which encourages electrification and will substantially move it forward, but we're not requiring it for stoves, for example. In the event builders elect to keep a gas stove, we are requiring a much stronger and more effective ventilation systems to improve public health. So that is now in code for new construction, and we think that will have some positive benefits.
Thank you, Chair. We're also joined on the line by our colleagues from the Department of Finance to follow up on the inquiry on the timing of funding available. I'd like to invite our colleague Teresa Calvert to share a bit more.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining the call. As you will see in our budget summary pages, which are in the link that Andrea put in the chat early on, we do have the energy package proposed to be allocated over 2 fiscal years. So the first fiscal year is 2022-23 for a total of about $938 million. And then in the second fiscal year, 2023-24, it would be about $1.1 billion of the $2 billion in total referenced earlier.
Thank you, Teresa. We have another question around the details of the $380 million towards battery storage and what that will look like. Will it be provided to certain stakeholders or entities? And really, how do we expect to hear a little more about the process for that?
Yeah, I'd invite Jonah Steinbuck, who is the deputy in charge of our research and development division that's going to be overseeing this. Jonah, if you'd like to speak to that, you'd be welcome.
I don't think Jonah's mic is working currently.
Oh, okay. Well, Jonah is on. If he's not able to, I'll try and channel him. But we'll be doing this the same way we've done our other storage solicitations. We'll be coming out with periodic solicitations with specific goals at specific times, and then they will be done on a competitive basis, and we'll be awarding those. Obviously, with all of our storage work, we're trying to move it as expeditiously as possible. This is not an academic exercise. There are very real threats to grid reliability that we're dealing with. So the storage work, we're going to be trying to expedite as much as we possibly can, but it will be a competitive solicitation process.
Thank you, Chair. We also have a question around the opportunities here for jobs. And really, if there are certain either investments that we can share or just reiterate to this group around clean energy jobs and also engagements in supporting local economies. Perhaps I'll invite Director Myers and or others to jump in if they have any additional thoughts on that.
Well, as noted, that is going to be an important part of the whole economic development process, is to make sure that we include job training. We're early days, and as I think David laid out, the Lithium Valley Commission is very representative and very engaged in broader conversations, as will the state government, us, the GoBiz, as well as the labor agency and others, in making sure that we bring high road career path jobs to the Valley and other resources as well to support that, from education to other training, et cetera. So early days for us, but something that we're very committed to.
Thank you, Director Myers. So we're here at time. We do have a few additional topical briefings that we're sharing on screen here with you now, remaining for the week. We invite you to join us at these upcoming briefings. You can visit the California Natural Resources Agency website to learn more at resources.ca.gov. And also, as we're ending, welcome you all contacting all of our agencies. If you have any additional questions, we appreciate your time today and look forward to engaging you in additional conversations around how to move forward on the proposed budget from Governor Newsom. Thank you so much.